We're going to talk today on Dylan Talks Tone about 5 reasons why your guitar will not stay in tune. I guess more accurately, I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do to keep your guitar from going out of tune. So we're going to talk about the concept of staying in tune, and then I'm going to give you 5 practical things. And I really think all of these things, here I'm looking at my list, all of these things are basically free. So this is just going to be some stuff with some tools that you can have around that you'll be able to do to keep your guitar in tune better. Before we get started, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and the like button if you like guitar stuff, because that's what we do pretty much just about every day of the week around here, live streams and various things. And also check out Patreon, patreon.com/DylanTalksTone, and the YouTube member stuff down there. We got a bunch of special stuff going for that. Please check that stuff out because you are really the ones, all you viewers, that support what we do. Also, buy pickups over at Dylan Talks Tone. Okay, now that we got that stuff out of the way, let's talk about tuning stability on your guitar. All right, so when we're talking about tuning stability, obviously we're talking about staying in tune. Tuning is the key to everything, right? The rest of our playing. We can tune the guitar and we can play it, but does it stay in tune? The key to this is everything returning to pitch when we let go. Let me explain to you what that means. Basically, what we're doing is on every guitar is we set the length of the string by the scale length and the intonation, right? And then we set the tension so that it rings at a particular pitch, right? And when we change that tension, then it is no longer in tune. So what happens is when we are playing, we are actually constantly changing the tension of the strings. So when we play, we hold a chord, right? Or when we play here, we are changing the tension because we're pressing on the strings, we're doing various things, we're bending, right? Or in the case of a guitar with a tremolo on it, we're actually even doing more changes, which we'll get into in a minute. So what we want to have happen is when we let go of a note, so if we go from this note to this, we want that string to go back where it started from, okay? Because we're always moving them around just a little bit. So we want that string to go back where it came from. We want it to return to pitch. So if our guitar is not staying in tune, there are things that are happening that are keeping it from returning. So if we take it away from pitch, we want it to return to pitch, right? We want it to just at rest. So let's look at a few things now that we kind of have that concept down that can stop us from doing that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover is loose parts. And we're going to cover parts specifically having to do with the string. So let me just use my little pointer here. So on this guitar right here, this is a good example of a guitar that could have, if it was not adjusted correctly, loose parts. Each saddle has this screw and this screw, both on one on each side, to adjust the height of the saddle. If you have one of those little, here's the thing, what can happen is you can actually tighten this up and you can raise this saddle up, and one of those little nuts can be, or those little screws can be slack. And if it's slack, then this saddle can pivot from side to side a little bit as you're playing, and it can also move out of adjustment. So that's very, very important on a bridge like this. One of the other things that can happen, let's go up to the other end of the guitar, is our retaining nut right here for our tuner can come loose. And if this comes loose and this little washer is loose underneath here, it can allow the post of the tuner to actually move around. The other thing that can happen is we can have play or movement in our tuners. So if we come over here and we move this a little bit, okay, and nothing happens. So right now, let's see. So that's nice and tight. But if we were to pluck that string and move this and nothing happened, if there was a little slack spot in there, that would give us room for some movement. And tuning instability because basically it would make it to where the string wasn't moving when we wanted it to move. On the other side of the tuner, if this screw right here gets loose, then what can happen is the tuner can actually twist in the hole, and then that will obviously change the string tension, right? Because that would make the post twist. So we want to make sure that this is tight, make sure that the nut on the back is tight, and make sure that we don't have any play in our tuning keys. So loose parts are super important, especially as they relate to the string itself. On a guitar with a bolt-on neck, like this Telecaster, we just want to make sure that these are tight. Now, most people will default to over-tightening these screws. They do not need to be overly tight. If you put the screwdriver in, you get it snug, and you just give it a little like that, that's all you need. This does not have to have a bunch of torque. I've seen many, many guitars where the finish has been imprinted from this being over-tightened. This has been, the neck's not going to come off the guitar. We don't need to worry about it for sustain, bro, or any of that kind of stuff. If the screws are nice and snug, they'll be totally fine, but we do want to make sure that they are loose so that the neck doesn't shift around in the pocket. Next, let's talk about how you put your strings on. You see how we've got 3 wraps here, 2.5 wraps here, 3 wraps here. That's all you need. I'm sure we've all seen those pictures on the internet of a big ball of string around here, right? That is like a bunch of string coiled up around here. What happens is that coil then can expand and contract when we play. So as we play and we've got the strings moving around, that coil will expand and contract and give us tuning instability. If this is nice and tight against the post, it's not doubled up. See, we just got 3 wraps here. It's not doubled up, and it's just nice and tight. Now, some folks will do this stupid over-under knot thing and whatever. I think that's dumb. It's not necessary. Just 3 wraps just like that, and you'll be just fine. Everything locks in, nice and stable. It works perfect. But just make sure you don't have a huge wad of strings. So that's number 2. Make sure that you string your guitar properly. Let's talk real quick about locking tuners. This is not inherently for tuning stability. It's actually for convenience. As you pull the string through and lock it, it's kind of a one-hand operation. You don't have to fight a bunch of stuff, and it's very fast for string changes. Now, the beauty of locking tuners that can... don't put locking tuners on your guitar just to make tuning stability better, because that's not really why you do it. But a side effect is, if you notice this guitar, there are no wraps. So if you look here, you'll see I've just pulled the string through, and I've tightened it up, and I've snipped it off. Maybe not tight enough. I like to have them a little closer. But there you go. See there how you have, right here, you have, there's no wraps. So it's just locked to the guitar. And that's how you do it. When you use a guitar with locking tuners, you just pull them through, pull it nice and tight, tighten it down. Don't tighten it too tight, because if you do, you'll crimp the string and it'll break, but don't do it too loose so it doesn't slip in there, and boom, there you go. The next thing we want to talk about is friction. So when we move the guitar, when we move the strings around, we want the strings to return, right, to where they started from. What's going to cause that to not happen is friction a lot of times. And so we're going to talk about 2 different areas, and we're going to split this into 2. So loose parts, number 1, how you put the strings on your guitar, number 2, with locking tuners and etc. Number 3, we're going to talk about friction, but we're going to split up in 2 parts. Number 3 is going to be the nut. So when we're playing, the nut actually, the string is constantly moving back and forth, right? Just microscopically moving back and forth as we're playing. And so what we want to have happen is we want some lubricity here, and we want this nut slot to be cut not only to the right height for playing, but we also want it to be slick enough so that as we play, and it's microscopically moving back and forth, it can be moving back and forth freely. We want to make sure that there's no burrs in there. So there's a couple of things here. One, we want our setup to be good. If our nut height is really high, then here's what happens. We're pulling, remember when we play the guitar, we're pulling the guitar away from pitch. So as we bear down on a chord in our first position, if this nut height is too high, it's really bending that string down and really pulling it away from its ideal pitch. So your cowboy chords, as it were, could be out of tune if your nut height is too high. So if you've got a brand new guitar that's never been set up before and you're having a hard time with your first position chords being in tune, it's possible that the nut is too high from the factory. That can happen. The other thing is, we want to make sure that the friction point in here, there's no burrs, okay, so that everything moves back and forth freely. On a Gibson like this, we want to make sure that especially the B and the, the D and the G strings, the nut slot is cut properly. If the nut slot's cut properly, you won't have tuning stability problems. I don't have tuning stability problems on any of my Gibsons, but it's because I took a little extra time to make sure that the nut was cut properly. It's a common misconception that you have to worry about that on a Gibson, but you can set it up. If you look at these up real close, you'll see that I've got them kind of custom cut a little bit so that they'll work properly. The other thing, obviously, would be nut material. So on really inexpensive guitars, you're going to have plastic nuts. As you go up, you're going to have bone, you're going to have synthetic bone, things like that. But all nuts can be susceptible to having some burrs in them from manufacturing. So here's what I do. When I put my new set of strings on, before I throw my old ones away, I take the cutoffs and I just kind of run them through the nut slots, okay? And then that'll kind of clean out any burrs that might have built up or even grime from playing it that would cause friction. So make sure that you kind of just clean that up, make it nice and clean. You can use graphite lube. We have, I really like the Lizard Spit, I think it's called Slick Nuts, and it's a graphite lube that you can put in there. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It works really well. It's not messy, it doesn't have buildup, it's not oily, and it works real well, so I would use that if you're having some sort of friction problem. But synthetic nuts will do a lot better job than anything. So if you use any kind of graphite nut, tusk, anything like that, synthetic nuts will always do, pretty much always, if they're set up properly, will always do better with that kind of friction in the nut. The fundamental thing here is we just want to make sure, again, that that string is returning to its original position in the nut. So now let's talk about the bridge. Number 4 is we want to make sure that our bridge setup on our guitar, and I'm going to show you a couple of different types here, is good. Because if it's not good, if it's not correct, we're going to have the same friction problems, but there's a few different types of bridges that can cause some issues. Since I've got the Gibson here, we'll look at this first. We want to make sure that our bridge, there's a couple of things on a Gibson. We want to make sure that we don't have any burrs in the metal right here, right? And that the edges are nice and clean. And we want to make sure that our intonation screws are cleaned out so that everything moves back and forth properly so that we can set it up right. One of the other things that can happen is because people are so obsessed with sustain, bro, on their guitar, they'll tighten this all the way down to the body, the tailpiece all the way down to the body, and it will cause on some bridges, on some Gibsons, the string to bind against the back of the set, the bridge right here. Raise your tailpiece up, you will not lose sustain. That is a total myth. We could do an entire video just on that. We've done that video. Raise this bridge up because that's what it was designed for. That's why these screws are here. So raise that up so you don't have that friction right there behind the saddle, because then that string can move back and forth as you play it. Let me show you a couple other styles of bridges. This is a PRS Fiore, and this has a 2-post tremolo. Friction on bridges with tremolos can be a little tricky. So we want to make sure, first of all, that all the pieces are loose, go through all the things that we already talked about. And then we want to make sure that this is set correctly. We have a whole video on setting a float. This is actually floated, on floating bridges, but we want to make sure that there are no edges or burrs on the adjustment screws and that they are not over tightened. And I'll show you that again in a minute. If you have a Floyd Rose bridge, you want to make sure that you do not adjust, especially on a cheap one, on an import one. You want to make sure that you do not adjust these two screws with full tension on the strings, because you can do damage to that front edge of a Floyd Rose, and then that will cause a little burr on there, and it will cause that edge to not return to pitch as you're playing it. So if you have tuning stability problems on a Floyd Rose, in amongst some of the other problems you can have, make sure that that front edge on any edge style tremolo, Ibanez as well, can have, on a dual action tremolo, can have that freedom, okay? The other thing you don't want to have is any binding up on the back. So let's see, do I have a guitar with the cover off? Hang on. Some folks will want to put like dampening stuff in here, like felt or whatever. I personally would not do that, because what happens then is you create friction in these springs, and as you use the guitar, then the tremolo cannot return to pitch, because you've got friction in here. Friction is bad. You do not want friction. So make sure that you do that. Now, a couple of things since we have this guitar in our hand, the 6-string, 6-screw tremolo, like that vintage Fender style, is we want to make sure that these screws, the 6 screws, are not over tightened. Because what will happen is, and we want to make sure they're tightened equally across, because what will happen is, as we use the tremolo, okay, if it's not tightened equally and one of them is over tightened, the tremolo will actually pitch to the side, okay? And there will actually also be some friction on the bottoms of these screws and on the fronts of these screws. So it will not return to pitch properly, and it will also not actuate properly, because if one of them is over tightened, like I said, it can kind of work on an angle. So we don't want to have that problem as well. Also, if you lock this down, if you want this completely locked down, do not over tighten these screws, because then it will still give you tuning stability problems. And then number 5 on this list is going to be your playing technique. There is a few things here, and for those of you that have played for a while, get in the comments and let me know kind of what things that you found affect your technique as you play. So there's a few things. One is being super ham-fisted and really, really gripping down. When we fret a note, right, we don't really have to press down that hard, right? And I can press down harder and pull the string out of tune. I can pull down on the string. I can push up on the string, and I can push it way deep towards the fretboard. Especially if you have bigger frets, you can be prone to do this. You almost get that sort of like scalloped vibrato problem, right? And we can pull ourselves out of tune that way. So think about your technique. The other thing is your picking hand technique. And I think a lot of people don't think about this. I did an experiment a long time ago. I did a video on it, I think, where I put 7s and 8s on a couple of guitars. And what I learned was I was pulling myself out of tune a lot more. And it made me realize that I could probably train my fretting hand to be more delicate, like, you know, have a softer touch. But I realized that I was picking really hard, and I was really just yanking on the strings with my picking hand. And that was making it to where I was pulling myself out of tune as well. Also, if you're a palming person, if you palm mute a lot, depending on the type of bridge, so this has a floating style bridge, and you could really affect that depending on how you play. So make sure that you are not pulling yourself out of tune while you play. It's just, technique is a thing, right? So think about all of this stuff put together, and as we're thinking about how to keep our guitar in tune, go back to this. When we play, we're pulling the string away from ideal pitch. We just want it to go back where it came from. If you can think of that, then you probably won't chase problems around so much. A lot of people will buy stupid little trinkets to put on their guitar to fix the tuning problems, blah, 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 blah. But if you would just remember that super fundamental thing, that you're trying to get the string to go back where it came from, what's causing it to not do that, and isolate it, You'll be able to actually fix the problem instead of buy some stupid Band-Aid thing to put on your guitar. Let me know what your tuning stability problems are, what your experiences with fixing them are. Get in the comments and let me know. Do me a favor and like and subscribe, and we'll talk about more guitar stuff in the next video. Thanks for hanging out.